the results. Yes, in fact, she accused candidate Trump of charging the election was rigged every time things were not going his way. She called that horrifying for our country. Yes, horrifying. Was that just because she was convinced she was going to win? We'll put that question to our exclusive guest this hour. Top Clinton advisor Philippe Reines, seen here playing candidate Trump in the Democrats' mock debate sessions last year. He has a lot he wants to get off his chest about a civil war brewing within the Democratic Party. Senators like Kirsten Gillibrand suddenly turning on the Clintons over the Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Is it your view that the President Clinton should have stepped down at that time, given the allegations?
Yes, I think that is the appropriate response, but I think things have changed today, and I think under those circumstances, there should be a very different reaction.
Philippe is blunt about saying he thinks Senator Gillibrand is a hypocrite because she gladly took Bill and Hillary Clinton's endorsements and campaign money, but is now running for the hills because of the nationwide sexual harassment scandal that has now reached Capitol Hill. Does Team Clinton have a point? Or are they just mad that Democrats no longer seem to fear the power couple? And what about President Trump? Why is he tweeting about Al Franken but ducking on Roy Moore? We'll dig into all of that, fair and balanced as always. But we begin with our chief Washington correspondent, James Rosen, with more on Senator Gillibrand. Good evening, James.
Ed, good evening from Washington. As the occupant of the New York Senate seat once held by Hillary Clinton, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is frequently mentioned as a potential contender for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. Early in her political career, she campaigned with former President Clinton, but now Gillibrand tells the New York Times that Mr. Clinton should have resigned the presidency amid the sexual misconduct allegations that led to his impeachment and acquittal at trial in the Senate.
Things have changed today, and I think under those circumstances, there should be a very different reaction. And I think in light of this conversation, we should have a very different conversation about President Trump.
Former President Clinton's office did not respond to our request for comment, but Gillibrand's comments provoked a furious reaction from Philippe Reines, the former spokesman for Hillary Clinton, who tweeted, and I quote, "The Senate voted to keep President Clinton, but not enough for you, Senator Gillibrand? Over 20 years, you took the Clintons' endorsements, money, and seat. Hypocrite. Interesting strategy for 2020 primaries. Best of luck." Prominent figures at the New York Times, The Atlantic Magazine, MSNBC, and elsewhere have recently called for the Democratic Party and the feminist movement to have a, quote, reckoning with their defense of the 42nd president against charges including rape similar to those sweeping various industries today. Mr. Clinton belatedly acknowledged an inappropriate relationship with his 22-year-old intern, Monica Lewinsky, but he denied the rape allegation from Juanita Broaddrick. In January of this year, a Gallup poll asked respondents to rank how various presidents will go down in history. 33% said Bill Clinton will be ranked above average. 33% said just average. 17% listed him below average, with 10% predicting he'll be ranked outstanding. Ed?
Thank you, James. And here now, the aforementioned Philippe Reines, former advisor, or still an advisor, really, to Hillary Clinton. Good evening, Philippe. Appreciate you being here.
Hi, Ed. Thank you for having me, I think.
We're old friends, so this should go well. I want to get straight to that tweet about Senator Gillibrand and what you said. Ken Starr spent $70 million on a consensual sex act. Senate voted to keep President William Jefferson Clinton, but not enough for you, Senator Gillibrand. And we'll get to the rest of it in a second. First of all, you seem unhappy that Ken Starr had $70 million in unfettered power to investigate a president. So why are you cheering on Robert Mueller these days?
No, I don't think that's the point I was making. The point I was making, and thankfully I have more than 280 characters to do so because it's a pretty complicated subject, is what's happening now is that people are very bravely coming forward, whether it's Rose McGowan or Barbara Comstock or Lee Korfman, with accusations of things that they felt they could never come forward with before. That has taken a tremendous amount of bravery, and it's important. What happened with Bill Clinton is a complete false equivalency. There's no human being in the United States whose personal life, their infidelities, were looked at more than Bill Clinton. His accusers were afforded the opportunity to confront him. He was afforded the ability to defend himself. And my point about the $70 million is that it was thorough.
Okay, I'm going to give you the time to go through it. Let's pick it piece by piece, though. First of all, when you call Senator Gillibrand a hypocrite, are you admitting now that a lot of Democrats back in the late 90s did not call for President Clinton to resign over his relationship with an intern because they wanted him to stay in power? They wanted Democrats to keep power. Gillibrand wanted the Clinton money. She wanted the endorsements, so she didn't really speak her conscience.
I don't know why she chose yesterday. Part of me wants to give her the benefit of the doubt that she was baited by the New York Times. I don't think, to your viewers, I have to say much more than that about the Times. But her point was strange to me because she probably didn't come to this feeling and thought and position yesterday. Why she wouldn't have in the last 20 years vocalized it is strange to me. Nothing was stopping her. But what really was curious to me is why she didn't, what she didn't say, not what she did say. She didn't go on and say, I wish I had said something earlier. I regret not saying something earlier. And, you know, in the lead up to this, you talked about Democrats and Senator Gillibrand turning on the Clintons.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what happened. I think she turned to the Clintons. And that is just a false comparison.
Okay.
I have a feeling there are people watching right now who said, I am done with the Clintons. Stop talking about that.
Right. So,
and it was unnecessary for her to do that because, again, this is someone who had, I mean, this country had a reckoning over Bill Clinton's
I want to press you, though.
behavior.
Isn't it, in fact, that there are Democrats like Senator Gillibrand, Donna Brazile with her book, they no longer fear the Clintons. And part of your tweet, part of the reason why you're angry is that top Democrats are saying to the Clintons, get off the stage.
I don't think so. I think what Donna wrote in her book, I'm not really sure what she was doing. I think more than anything, the Democratic Party and people who know Donna are just flat out confused by what she wrote, especially since what she wrote and then what she subsequently said on television didn't really
we're running out of time,
up.
so I want to give you, I've been giving you time on all these, but I want to press you. You said that Bill Clinton's accusers were heard. And you talked about this sexual harassment, movement around the country where people are saying women need to be heard. Has Secretary Clinton done any soul searching? Does she regret that she didn't let Juanita Broaddrick and other women be heard?
I think if she were sitting here, she would say the same thing I'm saying, which is that Ken Starr, I mean, you don't have to believe
Okay, let's
me.
not go
You
back to
don't
Ken
have
Starr. I want
her.
to give you a chance.
No,
but has
the
she
reason,
done soul searching? She did not let Juanita Broaddrick, because Ken Starr was about Lewinsky. Hillary Clinton. Go ahead.
Ken Starr looked into Juanita Broaddrick. Juanita Broaddrick gave Ken Starr a deposition where she said nothing happened. So I think it's important to have those facts. Ken Starr, I think we can all agree, was not looking to protect Bill Clinton. The point about $70 million in multiple years is that if he could find something, he would have found it. He did tell us everything he found. The names beforehand, it's not right to, it is not correct to say a name like Juanita Broaddrick
so Hillary
came
Clinton,
up only after
Hillary
2000.
Clinton has not done any soul searching. She doesn't have any regrets about any of the female accusers were beaten up on, verbally by anyone associated with the Clintons over the years.
I think she's addressed this many times, and I guess that's my point, is that she's dealt with this, first of all, as a wife, and then as a public figure 20 years ago.
Okay, I want to shift gears to something I mentioned.
And I think again, the point that you're making, that there should be some kind of renewed soul searching or reckoning, that is absolutely appropriate when it comes to Harvey Weinstein or when it comes to Roy Moore. It is not necessary when it comes to Bill Clinton, because in 1998, we all lived through the greatest reckoning in American political history.
Actually, I was going to shift gears, but when you mentioned Roy Moore, I know it was interesting. I believe it was yesterday, after Ivanka Trump had said about Roy Moore that there's a special place in hell for people who prey on children. You tweeted on November 16th, quote, she took her sweet time. She didn't say Moore should drop out. So by your logic, isn't Senator Gillibrand right, at least, that if there's alleged misconduct, Bill Clinton should have stepped aside? You're saying Roy Moore should step aside. You haven't litigated it. You don't know what's true and what's not. And yet yesterday you went out there, Philippe, and you said that Ivanka Trump should have told him to step aside. And instead you said about her, quote, there's a special place in hell for those who exist only to cover for Donald's sins, meaning the president. Aren't you being a hypocrite as well?
I don't think so. I think I was making 2 points. One, the larger point is that for the last year and a half, starting with the campaign, we've seen Ivanka play a role where she really was mostly enabling and then covering for her father. They trot her out when, and yesterday was a perfect example of this, the president, for whatever reason, probably political, and he doesn't want to lose in
But hang on,
Alabama
the president
twice.
said in Asia, if the allegations are true, Roy Moore should step aside. And then you say Ivanka Trump is, quote unquote, trotted out. She is a woman in her own right. If you allow other women to speak out who are Democrats, whether it's Senator Gillibrand or anyone else, why can't Ivanka Trump speak on her own 2 feet? Why do you have to demean her by saying she was trotted out?
Well, I think Ivanka demeans herself with her behavior, but
What behavior?
I think the
She
point,
said that anyone who mistreats children deserves a special place in hell. Do you agree with her?
yes,
Okay, so how did she do something wrong?
the deepest, hottest place in hell. Absolutely.
Okay, so
But I
you
think
agree
there's
with
one
Ivanka Trump. So why did you attack her? That's my question.
I agree with her, but she didn't go one step further. And the point I'd make that you're not making is that the hierarchy of the Republican Party wants this guy to go. They've been spending the last week thinking of every conceivable plan to get rid of him. The Trumps, including Ivanka, are out of step. And the other point is she was speaking because her father wasn't. And I know what you just quoted, but everyone has been basically holding their breath for President Trump to say something, and he really hasn't.
He
And
said in
I think
Asia
that's
that if
why
the
Ivanka
allegations
did.
are true, he should step aside. That wasn't good enough for you?
It's not a matter of what's good enough for me. The people of Alabama are going to decide.
But when there were allegations
The
against
Republican
Bill
Party
Clinton,
wants
when there were
him gone.
allegations against Bill Clinton, you wanted them, hey, it should be fairly litigated. So in the case of Roy Moore, nobody here is defending him, but this happened 30, 40 years ago, and it hasn't been litigated. So why are you just saying throw him aside? You don't know the truth.
I think that the distinction is that Roy Moore, his victims, his accusers have never been heard until now. They deserve to be heard, and there's a problem in that unless I'm missing something, no one in the state of Alabama is in any way investigating these crimes because they're old.
Alleged crimes,
Now,
sure.
The only time he is going to be held accountable is first at the voting booth on December 12th, and then second, if the Republican leadership is to be believed, when he is sat and they try to expel him, which is something I'll believe when I see. But the larger point, Ed, is that people need to have their day, both people who are accusing people of crimes and both the people who are being accused.
Okay, I went over time already.
Roy Moore has not had that. Al Franken has not had that.
And
Bill
I hope you think I've
Clinton
been
has
fair.
had that in spades.
I've tried to let you have a lot. I want to play one more clip because I said this at the top of the show. Here's what Hillary Clinton said in the last presidential debate.
That's horrifying. Every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. That is not the way our democracy works.
Philippe, very simple last question. Here we are more than 1 year later, and Hillary Clinton is saying Donald Trump was not legitimately elected.
She accepted his election
she's not
2
accepting
a.m.
it
in the
now.
morning, election night. I was there when she spoke to him.
Right. And a
what
year
she is
later, she's saying it was not legitimate.
No, what she is saying is that what happened is something that can happen again. And it's unfortunate that the president won't take it seriously until he's at the wrong end of it. If she had been president, if she had been elected, she would have, and she learned that the Russians helped her, she would have been furious. She would have said, this is unacceptable. We are going to figure this out. We're going to go after them.
So,
President Trump has not done that because he was on the right end of it. And that's a problem because the Russians want to disrupt, and they're going to disrupt who's in office. And I would think the Republican majorities in Congress, the governorships, and the White House would be concerned because they are the biggest targets for a country hell bent on disrupting us.
Giving you a lot of time. Appreciate you coming on. I hope you'll come back and you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Anytime, Ed. Thanks,
Thanks, Philippe. Here now to react, Katrina Pearson, former Trump campaign spokesperson, now spokesperson for America First Policies, and Dr. Wendy Osefo, political commentator and professor at Johns Hopkins University. Katrina, I want to start with you to get the Republican perspective. How do you react to what Philippe said?
Well, leave it up to a man defending Bill Clinton to be so misogynistic and sexist with his tone regarding Ivanka Trump, who is a very well-educated and accomplished businesswoman in her own right, to insinuate that she can't speak without her dad's permission does shine a spotlight on why the people are fed up with the Clintons. But I will agree with him on one thing. This isn't really about Bill Clinton, Ed. This is a much bigger picture, because I just don't buy this sudden moral compass that the left has with regards to the way men are treating women. This is all about political expediency, and we know this because Senator Gillibrand, who's out there now suddenly finding her moral compass after taking tons of money from the Clintons, hasn't said anything about Bob Menendez and the allegations about him with underage prostitutes, hasn't demanded anyone resign today, and we're seeing this all play out before our eyes.
We should say Senator Menendez has vociferously denied that he engaged in improper conduct, as you suggested. But Wendy, I want to get your reaction. Should there be a reckoning for Bill Clinton within the Democratic Party, as some on the left have suggested?
We can say that there can be a reckoning for Bill Clinton, but what needs to be underscored here, and why Philippe was talking about that $70 million, is this was consensual. It was consensual between adults. What we are seeing here from Franken, who is on the left, as well as Moore, who is on the right, has nothing to do with politics. It goes to a broader issue of sexually predatory behavior that we see not just in Capitol Hill, we see in Hollywood, and some of us see every day as we walk in the streets.
But Wendy,
so we have to keep that at the forefront of the discussion, because once we make it political, we are moving to the side the women, the men who have been victims of this action.
But Wendy, you and Philippe are both right that the Monica Lewinsky situation was litigated a lot, and Bill Clinton paid a heavy price for that. But when you say it was consensual, there were other allegations that were not consensual, allegations of rape that, I should say in fairness, Bill Clinton has vehemently denied himself. Why wasn't that? Is there going to be a reckoning on that, is my question.
And that's the answer. The answer is that $70 million was to find any and everything as far as evidence to say that these accusations are actually correct. And with that money, what was found was the blue dress from Monica Lewinsky. Now, everyone deserves their day in court. Everyone deserves to have these accusations fleshed out. And we have to make sure that happens. And that is the difference here. We have to make sure that the accusers on Moore's side are also heard. Where is the investigation, or are we going to have one?
All right, let me get Katrina in
here. But at the end of the day, Ed, here's the situation. This is not about a reckoning, okay? This is definitely political, and it's very highly charged. Because if this was about women, if this was about the women, Senator Gillibrand herself says that there are sitting members of Congress who are preying on women. She refuses to name those names. That is completely unacceptable, and that is my point.
This is not political.
Go ahead, Wendy, and then I got a last question.
To say that this is political is to undermine everyone who has ever been sexually harassed. This is about a systemic problem. That's not the point you made. Then you need to speak clearer, because that's not what you just said. We need to make sure that everyone who's ever been harassed has their day in court. This is not about politics.
Katrina, and have Senator Gillibrand name those names. The people need to know who is preying on the people here in Congress.
I suspect that some of those names on Capitol Hill are going to be coming out because there's a lot of public pressure. Last question, Katrina. There's been a lot of pressure, speaking of pressure, on the president, on the White House. You heard it from Philippe. I want to give you a fair chance to respond. I noted the president said in Asia that if it's true, Roy Moore should step aside. He hasn't commented in recent days. I'm going to give you a chance as somebody who supports him. Should Roy Moore step aside, yes or no?
You know, Ed, I am someone who's worked on the forefront of insurgent campaigns against the establishment, being a candidate myself. And I've just made it a point to never believe anything weeks leading up to an election. The president is absolutely right.
That is terrible.
It is absolutely right that the people of Alabama need to make this decision. If Democrats in Washington, D.C. can reelect a mayor after being caught on video smoking crack cocaine with a prostitute, and then
a president who said grab women by the genitalia, that's a president that you support? Are you serious?
If Democrats can do that, Republicans can elect their own candidates as well.
Let's not talk about Democrats who elect a mayor who smokes crack cocaine when we have a president.
Wendy, I'm going to let Wendy talk. Wendy, let me ask you this. Hang on, both of you.
Calm down.
Okay, Wendy. We got 1 minute left.
Calm down.
Let's not shout at each other. Let's do this in a nice way, polite. Wendy, what about the fact that Al Franken has admitted that he did something wrong, and it appears that he forced himself on the radio TV personality in that case? And the White House said today, look, the president has not admitted any wrongdoing. Why is that not good enough for you?
We have to be clear. Al Franken said, let's have a special counsel. Let us investigate this. The president should also have a special counsel because he
already has
over
a special
12
counsel.
women. He has over 12 women.
You want another investigation?
This is about politics. It's not politics. It's about you supporting a man.
This is all about politics.
It's about you supporting a man who said, I will grab women by the genitalia without...
You'll be able to hear from him direct.
That was Attorney General Jeff Sessions earlier this week confirming that a confidential informant who is believed to be critical to the investigation into Hillary Clinton's role in the Uranium One deal will tell lawmakers about what he found out. His identity was secret until now. Our own Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast Bureau tonight with the story. Good to see you, Trace.
Good to see you, Ed. The Senate Judiciary, House Intelligence, and House Oversight Committees are all looking into the 2010 sale of Uranium One. That's the Canadian mining company that had rights to 20% of U.S. uranium. And now the Reuters news agency is identifying the man whose testimony could make or break the investigation. He is William D. Campbell, a lobbyist who at the time of the Uranium One sale was a confidential informant for the FBI in a bribery investigation involving the head of Tenex. Tenex is a U.S. subsidiary of Russia's atomic giant Rosatom, the very same Rosatom that acquired Uranium One. William Campbell claims to have key information about the vast corruption in the Russian uranium industry, information he says he shared with the FBI back in 2009. Here's Campbell's attorney. Watch.
So here's my question. If he's telling this to the FBI, and at the time the FBI is telling him, oh yeah, we're briefing Bob Mueller and we're briefing the president on this, why did this CFIUS deal get allowed to go through?
CFIUS is an acronym for the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which gave the go-ahead for the Uranium One deal. CFIUS is made up of 9 U.S. agencies, including the State Department, which was led by Hillary Clinton. Critics say multi-million-dollar donations made to the Clinton Foundation by people connected to Uranium One influenced the State Department to vote yes. Clinton supporters say nonsense, pointing out that all 9 agencies, along with the president, signed on to the deal and that Hillary was not involved in the vote. For her part, Hillary Clinton says the congressional investigation is trying to shift attention away from special counsel Robert Mueller's Russian meddling investigation. And Clinton calls talk of appointing a special counsel to look into Uranium One a, quote, abuse of power. There is still no word exactly when William D. Campbell will testify before Congress. Ed.
Thank you, Trace. Here now with more. Michael Caputo, former Trump campaign senior advisor, and Marie Harf, a former State Department spokesperson during the Obama administration, now a Fox News contributor. Good to see you both. Marie, you were at the State Department, obviously, for a long time during the Obama administration. You and I have spoken off the air, and you don't think there's a whole lot to this Uranium One deal. But how do you know that when we have not yet heard from this confidential informant?
Well, because I've seen no evidence of any wrongdoing that involves Hillary Clinton here. There's a lot of insinuation, a lot of people throwing around accusations, but not one shred of evidence that Hillary Clinton herself was involved in this decision. And having worked at the State Department and knowing that there were these numerous cases under this CFIUS committee going on, never did I know that a Secretary of State was ever involved in them. And the idea that the other agencies that had to vote on this would have somehow cared about the Clinton Foundation or its donations, I mean, truly, I served in this administration. Nothing could be further from the truth. So, sure, let's hear from this confidential informant. I would love to hear from him because I don't think he's going to have anything to say that involves some of these conspiracy theories. He may have interesting information about Uranium One, but I don't think it's tied to Hillary Clinton.
Michael, what about it? Is it a conspiracy theory? Is it a whole lot of nothing? Or might this confidential informant finally blow the lid off something big?
Well, I've got a bit of a perspective on it. During the same time that CFIUS was examining the Rosatom purchase of Uranium One, I was, my firm does litigation communications. I was representing the French defense contractor Safran, also before CFIUS at the same time. Safran was buying a U.S. biometrics company, a company that does your fingerprints. And they went through 2 whole years, 24 months of examination as a close and historic ally of the United States. And at the end of their CFIUS examination, they were forced to never speak to the company they purchased in America ever again. In contrast, Rosatom got approval for Uranium One, the purchase of Uranium One in 90 days. Let me tell you something. All those executives at that French firm I work for, they know exactly what's going on here.
Marie, I want to try it one other way with you then, having heard that, which is that how is it that you and other Democrats have spent the better part of a year suggesting that the contact that was going on between the Trump campaign and the Russians, that the Russians were up to something nefarious? But when it comes to them, the Russians pouring money into the Clinton Foundation and pouring cash into Bill Clinton's pocket in the form of speaking fees, you seem to think, nah, it was no big deal.
Well, I'm not saying I would have run the Clinton Foundation the way that they did, but these are two separate issues, Ed. Let's be very clear. You're trying to merge the two. The first is the intelligence community. This is not Marie Harf's perspective. The nonpartisan intelligence community has said that the Russian government intervened in our election to help elect Donald Trump because they didn't like Hillary Clinton. Now, what the special counsel is looking at is whether there were, people in the Trump world working with the Russians. I don't know the answer to that. None of us do yet.
Fine.
Sure, did the Clinton Foundation do some things I wouldn't have done? Of course, but that is very different than a foreign power working to undermine our democracy.
Michael,
that is a very, very different thing.
Michael, I got 15 seconds. Is there going to be a special counsel? Is the Justice Department going to move forward on Uranium One? Yes or no?
There really ought to be a special counsel. I know the $500,000 that Bill Clinton was paid by Renaissance Capital. There are a lot of people at Renaissance Capital in Russia back in those days who are Westerners who could speak to this issue if they were called. And there were 15 Democrats close to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama registered to lobby on behalf of the Kremlin and Kremlin companies at the same time.
Michael, I love you, buddy. You're making a great case, but I can see from the smile on Marie's face, she ain't buying it.
The tin hat looks good on you, friend. We'll see how this turns out.
You both have a wonderful weekend.
You too, Ed.
Still to come. The NFL now investigating sexual misconduct allegations against Jameis Winston. He's back in trouble. And it's not his first time being accused of being inappropriate with a woman. Plus, President Trump's promise to overhaul our complicated tax system could happen by the end. That includes a controversial provision to repeal Obamacare's individual mandate. But getting to 50 votes in the Senate is going to be a tough haul. Listen to this.
I never promised anybody tax cuts because I'm one of those deficit hawks. We don't have enough revenue to pay for all of our expenses.
How can you there's a very narrow 52 to 48 margin in the United States Senate, and so when you lose one vote, it does give you pause for sure.
I'm a yes on the Senate bill today, but that doesn't mean we can't make it better.
There is a long and very bumpy road ahead. In fact, I'm inclined to say that the House bill is dead on arrival.
Here now, a key player for President Trump, Kevin Hassett. He's the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors at the White House. Kevin, we appreciate you coming on tonight. A victory for the president in round one. But the House, as you know, is the easy part. You heard right there from Senator Blumenthal, a long and very bumpy road. How do you convince skeptical senators, particularly Republicans in your own party, who say, look, the corporate tax cuts are permanent, but the middle class tax cuts are not?
Right. Well, the objective, obviously, from the outset for everybody in the White House and everywhere in Washington is to get Americans the tax code they deserve, to get a tax cut for the middle class and a corporate rate reform that are all permanent. But we also understand that there's a legislative process that the people in the Senate have to get something put together that can have a coalition of, at least 50 votes plus the vice president, and that they're working on that right now, and we support that process. And if they have budget rules that they have to follow that make some of the stuff expire, then they're going to have to do that in order to have a bill that changes the law. But right now the law is completely unacceptable, and so if they get something passed, then it'll be a step in the right direction. And then what'll happen, I really firmly believe, is that the tax cuts will have a positive effect on the economy, and they'll become easy to extend if there are some measures that expire.
Kevin, I understand the process. People get fed up with the process in Washington, and that's going to change what may or may not be in the bill. But in terms of the substance of it, there seems to be frustration even among some of the president's supporters. He talked in the campaign about finally doing away with the carried interest loophole, which really helps hedge fund managers and others, and they get to, be able to have their income tax at a much lower rate than the 39.6%. How does keeping that in this GOP plan help the forgotten man, forgotten woman that the president talked about helping in the campaign?
I think that the president's position on carried interest has been absolutely clear, but he also understands that it's a legislative process where he's not the dictator, where folks have to negotiate and trade off equity and efficiency and come up with a bill that can pass. The president has been a leader in this from the beginning. He's established, non-negotiables, like the rate has to be 20%, has to be a middle-class tax cut for the corporate tax. The middle class has to get a tax cut, and it has to be simpler. All of that stuff is, big picture leading by setting lines in the sand or drawing lines in the sand, but the details are things that the president recognizes that the members of Congress are going to have to work out. And so it's essential that we get a reform that changes the tax code, because right now we're chasing all of our businesses offshore and reducing the demand for American workers and driving down their wages.
Kevin, take a listen to some of the fireworks in the Senate Finance Committee as they were debating whether or not this helps the rich.
I really resent anybody saying that I'm just doing this for the rich. Give me a break. I think you guys overplay that all the time, and it gets old. And frankly, you ought to quit it.
Mr. Chairman, the public believes it.
I'm not through.
Okay.
I get kind of sick and tired of it. True, it's a nice political play.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
it's not true.
With all due respect, I get sick and tired of the richest people
Regular order, Mr. Chairman.
Getting richer and
Regular order.
We do a tax
Regular order.
middle class.
Wait a minute.
Regular order.
And over and over again.
Wait just
How many
a second.
times do we do this before we learn this?
Kevin, Democrats, you don't have a single Democratic vote on board, and they keep saying, no matter what you put in the bill, this is for the rich. How do you get to 50 votes plus the vice president in the Senate when you've got Democrats basically completely opposed to this?
Right. Well, I think that exchange that you just played is an example of people just, the opponents really of this bill at times losing track of the idea that the people who disagree